Hello and welcome to Anatomy of Us, a show dedicated to bringing real help to real couples. I'm your host, Melanie Studley.
What's up, guys? My name is Seth Studley. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and together we are high-performance marriage coaches.
We are cutting through the bullcrap and creating a movement of happy, healthy, badass couples all over the world.
Let's go! What's up, guys? Today we talk all about family and parenting. This is an episode that's super cool, super practical advice that really gave us a different perspective on how we parent. We interviewed Dan Peterson, and he is a practitioner. He's a therapist like me, and is a practitioner of the nurtured heart approach. And he goes into all kinds of stuff. It's a really super cool conversation.
Yeah, you are going to love it. So check it out, check him out, and enjoy the show.
What's up, Dan? Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well.
Right on.
Doing good. Yeah.
Right on. And so we met through a mutual friend, Larry Hagner, over at the Dad Edge, and we're talking to him right now. We're going to do some collaboration stuff, which is pretty cool. But how did you? How long have you known him, and how long have you been in a part of that group?
I think I joined either August or September of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working with him in his accelerator group for probably 13, 14 months now.
Oh,
awesome.
Right on.
Yeah.
And could you go ahead and introduce yourself too? You're a therapist. You have some stuff, compassforlife.com. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah. So first, I'm a dad and a husband. I've been married. It'll be 23 years next week.
Nice.
Ooh, awesome.
Yeah, I got 3 awesome kids. My son, Ryan, he's 16. Got a daughter that just turned 13 last week. Her name's Ella. And then my youngest is Ben. He's 11. I'm the oldest of 6 boys. So that's going to probably be part of the story we talk about today for sure.
Yeah.
And kind of my business, I'm a parent coach. I've been working with kids for probably 25 years. And probably the first 15 years, I was a therapist doing exclusively, just child therapy, but made a transition about 10 years ago to really work with parents and help equip them essentially to be the coach or the therapist,
Nice.
and really kind of help heal kids through the parent-child relationship.
Right
Beautiful. What made you
Yeah.
want to work with kids?
Like a couple things. One, being the oldest of 6, I had a lot of responsibility as far as helping out, taking care of. Thankfully, I enjoyed it. I'm good at it. So that's one element. The other element is when I was in, I think my senior year of undergrad, the girl I was dating was working with a kid who had autism, and they needed somebody else to help out. So I kind of took that on as an internship, but really just a way to impress a girl.
Yeah. There you go. It all starts that way.
Right.
Yeah. Immediately fell in love with working with kids, especially kids with disabilities. And then, I don't know, probably doing that for a couple of years led to just going into graduate school and getting a degree in psychology. And I tell people this all the time. Like, I feel more comfortable around children than I do adults. Like, I just feel like I'm at peace. I can kind of be in my element. I relate to kids. I can go in a room, a classroom, and within like just 30 seconds, be able to pinpoint the kids that are feeling anxious or behind the 8 ball and just need some help. So like my heart, my passion is, to really help those kids. So
Yeah. That's interesting because like as I did some research, and even just hearing you say that, my undergrad was in psychology, and of course I'm a therapist as well, and have worked in my early career, worked a lot with the special needs community, like Down syndrome, other different autism, other spectrum disabilities and developmental stuff. And I always felt a lot of stuff with Special Olympics, do a lot of volunteer work with them. And I always felt really at home with that population because I don't know what it was. I have another buddy who, like, him and I talk about this. In fact, Matt is like, we're drawn to that because it is like some of the realest, most genuine people you will ever meet, and it's
pure.
just pure. It's just on a different plane, and that is something so fulfilling and satisfying to work with folks like that. So, and it sounds like you feel the same way. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, just kind of add on to that a little bit. The kid that I started working with who had autism, I was doing it was called in-home support.
Mm-hmm.
It's like respite work. But I ended up working with him for probably a 5-year time frame, and he was in my wedding. He was my junior groomsman.
Oh man.
Yeah, yeah. So him and I, like, he had a huge impact on my life, and
For sure.
him and I connected in a way that probably most people would say kids or people with autism generally don't like relationships or are standoffish, but kind of proved all that wrong just
Yeah.
working with him. And it was, super rewarding. It was a great way to get my career started for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You just said something that I think I just want to highlight. There's a lot of people in the world who do not think of relationships with kids as being something that would be rewarding to them. It's not like we think of it like a one-way thing, like, oh, well, I help the kid do whatever. And I think that blocks a lot of people from having really fruitful relationships with their kids, or even, their friends' kids or whatever. When you don't see the possibility that kid could actually change you, and you just it's so honoring, like you're honoring the humanity of whoever it is. And I just want to point it out. I don't often meet people who think of kids that way. And I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. So, okay. By the way, listeners, this is, we're talking about parenting, right? How to be the best parents. Of course, this is a marriage show, but it's also a family show, and everything is related to everything. So today we're diving into parenting. And so so you are, the founder for Compass for Life. That's your business, right? And you're also practiced through the nurtured heart approach. And this is something that I have never heard of. Like in all my years of therapy, I've heard of Glasser, the guy that made it, which I guess I should have heard of the nurtured heart approach. But maybe
there's two Glassers, and a lot of people get those guys mixed up. So you might be referring to the other one, who's a little bit more renowned, a little bit more well known.
Yeah, that's probably the thing. But we're talking about the nurtured heart approach. So can you walk our listeners through some of the tenets of the nurtured heart approach, why it's impactful, and how they can, of course, find more information about it, and why it's so useful for our work with our kids?
Yeah, and it's interesting you say you've never heard of it. Almost every time I go into a training or presentation, ask people, "Have you ever heard of this?" Nobody ever says yes.
Yeah,
and to me, it's I came across this approach on accident. I had been practicing for 15 years before I heard about it. And when I first came across it, I was really pissed off, to tell you the truth, because I was like, how have I been working with kids this long and nobody shared this? Like, it should have been in my first class I ever took.
Yeah.
Every parent should read this approach, because really the whole premise behind this approach is that the connection between a parent and child is the most powerful reward reinforcement. It's like what drives a ton of behavior. Kids are created, as humans, we're created for connection, but kids aren't born with an idea of who they are. Are they loved? Are they valued? Are they competent? Like, that's given to them through connection and relationship. And so I can get into all the neuroscience behind connection and relationship and brain development, but like at the root, you're the prize as the adult. Your energy, your relationship, what you connect to, that's what makes you the prize. And a lot of times what happens is kids, I call them energy seekers, or kids that are more intense. They're just wired differently. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong. They're just created for more. And a lot of times the adults kind of interpret that behavior, or some of that misbehavior, as annoying or as impulsive or problematic. And really, it's just connection seeking. Because we light up. I don't know about you guys, but I'll speak for myself. When my kids do stuff that's annoying and irritating, my blood pressure goes up, my heart rate goes up. I'm a little bit more animated, and like they're on my radar. And so the whole premise behind this approach is that energy is the gift. And if you, as the adult, don't know when you're giving that and connecting, and the messages you're sending behind that, what's going to happen is you're going to be inadvertently connecting and creating this dynamic where there's a huge need and usefulness for being inappropriate or being problematic or challenging. And good luck disciplining that away.
Right.
It's like, what's more important? Privileges, rewards, or connection with a human being, especially a parent. So that's the foundation or premise is like we as adults have to know what we're connecting to, what we're giving our energy to. And within that, there's 3 stands, and all 3 of these have to be working in unison. Most parents or teachers use one of these stands, or they use them all, but at different stages. You have to use them in unison, otherwise, the whole thing will fall apart. But the first stand is just absolutely no unnecessary energy connection for problems. Lectures, warnings, reminders, countdowns, raising your voice, any of that stuff that's happening when you have undesirable behavior for energy seeking kids, especially, just communicates that I got my parents' attention. I'm on their radar. I'm connected. I don't really care if it's good or bad. I just want the highest, most animated version of you. And I think the way our brains are designed is when problems happen, our brain turns on and says, tune in.
Yeah.
When things are going well, especially if it's like the day-to-day stuff, our brain says, you don't really need to attend to it because it's taken care of. But if I'm a kid wanting deep connection, and every time I do something annoying or irritating, mom or dad stops what they're doing and corrects me, shoot, I just got a little jolt, a little connection. So you have to get really good about doing that. And I was terrible with this before. I was, countdowns, get your name on the board, a check, flip your card, all of the stuff that are warnings. It really just communicates weakness. It just creates drama and unnecessary energy. So that's the first stand. You have to get really good at that. The second stand is you have to intentionally, proactively connect and create like a deep connection with your kid when things are going well in a way that builds them up on the inside. So it's much more about, here's what I see you doing. Here's the character that it shows, as opposed to, good job, way to go, or here's what you earned for doing something well. It's really speaking about the truth of what's happening in the moment, and giving kids a lot of energy through just like clear discussion about what I see you doing, what it shows about who you are. So
let me pause you there for a minute. So just this morning, so we have 3 kids, soon to be 15-year-old boy, 13-year-old boy, 10-year-old girl, right? Which I want to ask you some kind of funny, specific questions later.
Yeah.
So our middle kid, the 13-year-old, is sick, so he's home all day, right? He's kind of milling around, slow, sick kid. And our 10-year-old had a Veterans Day concert. This will come out after Veterans Day, of course, but she was super excited. And our middle kid said something really kind, right? Like, what did he say?
Oh, he told when she was leaving for school, he said, "I love you and good luck." And
awesome.
I mean, that like melts her. It melts my heart. But
so
yeah.
in that, like he just did something good, right? Like catch your kids doing something good opposed to something bad, right? So what would have been the best thing to say? I think maybe one of us said,
"Oh, I told him thank you for telling her that." But yeah,
like thanked him. So what would be the best thing to say in that when he was doing something good, when we want to see more of that kind, loving, relationship building behavior?
So saying, hey, thank you for saying that was really kind, or that was very loving. Like there's nothing wrong with that. So this isn't about like if one's better, the other one's worse.
Right.
It's my mission or my purpose for saying these statements is I want to reveal to you the truth of who you are so that you see yourself that way, as opposed to telling you that I'm pleased with what you're doing or I'm happy because of what you did. So what's your kid's name that said this?
Tough.
Tuff.
Tough.
Oh, that's
Tough,
awesome.
Studley.
Yeah, Tough. I just heard you say, I love you. Good luck to your sister. That shows kindness. Here's what you did specifically in detail. Here's what it shows about who you are. And so it's like a mirror that just reflects over and over again the truth of who they are without any like attachment to like making us happy, or on the flip side of that is like taking us off or frustrating us.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Yeah. And the interesting part about this too is my guess is this was something either like above and beyond or something out of the ordinary. You had an emotional reaction because it was something that had a deep meaning, but it wasn't the day-to-day kind of operating.
Yeah.
So our brains notice that. Like if it's something out of the ordinary or really deep and meaningful, like we'll notice that. But my guess is he does that 100 times a day in different ways that are totally off your radar. Not because you're not in tune or interested. It's just because that's the way our brains are wired.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Like me thinking back, I can see how that would have been beneficial for me as a kid to build me up and go, oh, wait a minute. Okay. So part of my identity is like, I'm kind, I'm loving, I'm hardworking, I'm confident. Oh, this is who I am, kind of thing.
Sure.
Well, what's funny is that I think it was the night before. So it was last night. Tuff did another thing similar. And I commented on it and I just said, thank you for, and it was more along the lines of what you're saying. I said, thank you for, sharing this thing with your sister, whatever it was. And I said, that shows to me that you are a really kind boy, or not boy, I called him like a dude or something. But then what's funny is that sometimes he will ask me when I say thank you for things, he'll go, why did you say thank you when I told Hattie I love her? So he's actually looking for me to reflect back to him.
Yeah.
Like he's looking for it. And so I just love that. So what are the other things? What are the other things?
There was a third stand there.
Yeah. And again, this is like I don't think I said this in the beginning, but this is a tripod. All three stands have to be together. Take one away, the whole thing will collapse. But the third stand is just absolute clarity with where the line is. And if it's crossed, there's accountability and learning. But it's not a big deal. Like making mistakes is a way to master skills.
Right.
Like the more mistakes you make, the more practice you get at learning how to not make them again. Some kids need lots and lots and lots of practice.
Or some adults do as well.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess the way that I like to think about this is it's like how a referee would officiate, say, a basketball game. If a player is dribbling the ball and steps out of bounds, the ref just blows the whistle, and just says you're out of bounds. And then it's up to the player whether or not they're going to own that. They can give the ball back, try again, or they can throw a fit. Right. But the ref has no emotional investment, whether the player's in or out. Their responsibility or boundary is just hold them accountable and trust that they're going to figure it out.
That is just that right there, I think was worth the price of admission because parents, so obviously a lot of parenting has to do, oftentimes has to do with like where the parent is, their level of emotional maturity, how differentiated or individuated they are, and the ability to respond and not to react. And I've never heard that like basketball ref analogy before. It's like, okay, all 10 players on the court, they all the same rules apply to each one, right?
Yes.
The rules aren't going to change mid-game. All 3 or 4 refs on the court are going to call the same thing no matter what. A ref isn't going to go, I told you 1,000 times when your heel goes over the free throw line, just the thing. It's like, no ref is going to do that ever, right? But us as parents do that all the time, the time. So I just love that analogy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and think about it too. Say there's a kid that has ADHD. What would it be like if all 9 players, you step on the line, you're held accountable, but for the person with ADHD, you get a specialized plan. That's your first warning. That's because you're impulsive and you have like the message that communicates is that you're not competent. You don't have what it takes and you need special privileges or exceptions. That doesn't build a kid up. That just tears them down.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I can like with tons, dozens and dozens of kids that I've worked with, usually they had some sort of IEP or something like that. And oftentimes, and here's the goofy thing, like, because I know that you work in schools and I would work with school districts and stuff as well. Like, oh, Seth's here, go knock on the door, pull the kid out of class, and everybody's going, hey, Billy, who's that dude? Well, is that your dad? No. Is that your uncle? No. And it's like, and then the kid is set apart.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, now let's talk about stuff. You're like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to talk about stuff. I'm just embarrassed in front of all my friends. And this girl that I like also asked me, why am I leaving the class? I'm like, oh, I'm dumb. I got to go talk to Seth kind of thing. That's just like that whole framework just, that doesn't work. So absolutely.
Well, and that's that specific dynamic you're talking about. Right before I came across this approach, I was burned out. I was ready to quit. I actually had a job lined up as a financial planner. I was thinking, what's the complete opposite of working with kids and families? And like people with money.
Right.
Yeah. And the principal at the time asked me to go to this conference. And I'm so glad I did, because listening to this framework within like 30 minutes, I was like, this is what has been missing from my framework, my tools, because I'm so focused on trying to prevent problems, get problems to stop, and thinking that I'm helping, but really what I'm just communicating is the more problems you have, the more loving. Like think about the way schools operate. If you're a kid that's seeking connection or needing connection, if you have a problem, you get the teacher's attention, usually an assistant. If you're lucky enough, you get to go see the CEO or the president, who's the principal. You get to go down to the office, which is Grand Central Station. You get to hear all the gossip, and maybe you get a therapist, a psychiatrist, like the most loving humans on the planet for children. You get all of them.
Mhm.
And why in the world would I ever give that up?
Right.
If I mean, that's why I worked in schools, because I loved working with kids that were having problems, and they got the most passionate speeches, my best work, when generally they were at their worst or when they were having problems. So
Right. And it makes me think of like, we went through a season with Tough, actually, and we talk about this on our show. So listeners are familiar, if they've listened to us long enough, they're familiar. Like, we went through a really, really hard time with him, where we were parenting very incorrectly. We were doing the lecturing. We were like rewarding good behavior, but not sort of like seeing the inner who he is vibes.
yeah,
And it was so eye-opening, that whole process, because it really was like, it took me seeing him behave this way over and over and over until I realized, like, this kid loves to fight with us. It's like one of his favorite things. And he doesn't
yeah,
know that he loves it. He doesn't know that it's like, it's like a video game. It is literally like a video game for him. And
mhm,
so and again, he's awesome. He's wonderful. But one of the things that I had to start saying is like, hey, we have to stop engaging with him in this particular way, because it's like that, almost like pursuer distancer, or like a dog, like when a dog sees a rabbit and he's on. And it's like, there's
yeah,
almost nothing you can do but to like drop it and let it lie and wait, which just sounds
mhm,
so opposite. And it's the opposite of what people want to do. And it's anticlimactic. Like, it feels wrong. And like, our brains are wired for like, okay, I know this circuit, I yell, and then I say this, and then he yells, and then he slams the door, and then I do this. So it's like all the circuitry is telling you to do the opposite of
yep,
the best method. Like, see them, follow the rules of the thing, and drop it. Like, stop
yeah,
engaging. And it's so hard, especially if you have wired your kid to do it. Like, we definitely set him up, like teed him up, like, here's the ball, here's your golf club, now go. And then we would
yeah.
all freak out, right? So like, what would you say to someone who's in that cycle, like a 9, 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid, and they are now seeing like, oh crap,
Yeah,
I made half of this problem.
the first thing I would say is, the reason that you're operating that way is because you deeply love your kid.
Mhm.
It would not bother you if you did not care.
Mm.
And if you love your child and you deeply care for them, of course you're going to freak out, because that's what our brains are designed to do. It's biological. There's a fire, your brain says go put the fire out. If your kid's violating all the values of the family, that same part of your brain turns on and says go deal with it. So because you care, that's why you respond. Now, is it working? No, I'm miserable. I'm stressed. I'm starting to have panic at 3 o'clock when I hear the bus come.
Mhm.
I got a lot of the parents I work with, they have anxiety responses when the phone rings during the school day, because they're so used to getting calls from the schools. But again, all of that is because they deeply love and care for their kid. So what I say is, number one, you're the prize, you're the gift. And it's interesting, you were saying we just kind of teeing it up, and he seemed to love to drive us nuts. What he really loved is the most alive, animated version of you,
Yep.
which usually happens when we're stressed and like don't know what to do and feeling hopeless. So how would you like to learn 3 specific stands or tools to completely flip this, so that you're connecting with your kid at the right time, and you're still driven by love, but you're connecting to the things you want more of, and the things that are driving you nuts, you don't have to engage with anymore.
Yes, please.
And I've never had a parent say that's an idiotic idea. I want to put my kids on meds.
Right.
Right. And not that there's anything, like wrong with medicine, but
Oh,
you got to
yeah.
be careful. Sometimes medicine gets the credit, or medicine is the way to kind of deflect ownership on our part.
Mm-hmm. So what? I think we still haven't gotten to the third stand. So, or did we?
Well, yeah. So the third stand is absolute clarity what the line is. So it's more about a discipline model that if you make a mistake, how do you fix it, recover, learn, move forward, rather than pay for having problems, which is, infused with shame and conflict and escalating consequences that generally don't teach kids anything except how to be good liars or change the subject and make you start to feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah. This goes it. I wrote some notes down here, and I'm going to read like one of the things it says on your website, and we can talk about it. And then also what it reminds me of in a different modality, which you may be familiar with. Eric Burns' work, I think, is like back in the 70s. But you said kids have the innate need to be in relationship and to belong. And you spoke a lot about how parents are the prize, which honestly makes me feel really good about being a parent. Of like, I mean, if you're like 2 years old or 82 years old, who honestly doesn't feel good if someone who, maybe you think is cool or you respect or you admire says, hey, let's me and you hang out. Let's do something together. I like spending time with you and I want to be with you now. Like, I have friends like that. I'm hopefully a friend like that. Hopefully, and in relationships, it's like, hey, Melanie, I want to spend time with you. I want to go on a date night. That, I mean, how do you feel about that? It's like when I invite you somewhere, like, cool, I feel wanted, even, and I'm in my 40s. If my mom or dad said, hey, let's meet you go out to dinner. Let me take you out. I'd be like, okay, that sounds good. Let's go get a coffee. Let's do something, right? So how much more do little kids really seek that? And then going back to the Eric Byrne thing, he talks about, we all seek, he calls them strokes, positive or negative strokes, which is basically just attention. And if we don't get enough positive strokes, seen, heard, validated, loved, then we're going to do whatever we can to get those strokes in negative ways. And that makes me think about that proverb, an unloved kid will burn the village down just to feel its warmth, or something like that.
I don't think that's a proverb.
No, not like it's like an African proverb.
I thought you meant like
not
in the
from
Bible.
the book of the Bible.
Like, no, not from Proverbs.
Well, I don't think I've ever read that one.
I read it. That also, I love that you're saying that, and that was really funny. But I think of one of the things that I remember thinking when we were going through everything with Tough was that no matter what, if he started a fight with us, we had time. It didn't matter what was going on.
Yes.
It didn't matter if it was bedtime. Didn't matter if we were driving somewhere, going to someone's house. We made time for a fight. But guess what we didn't make time for? Playing Mario Kart. Yeah, like jump roping with him or kicking the soccer ball. We did make time for that.
It's not like we were ignoring him.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying
not enough. Like, he wanted more. Yeah.
Right. Well, I wish that I had almost the common sense to be like, hey, why don't I just swap these two things out? Like, intentionally add in connected time where I'm seeing him, I'm hearing him, we're playing and talking, and do it with like a heart of love and care versus, oh, he's lit the fuse. Now all of us are engaged for however long we need to be engaged for. And everyone is sort of like at the mercy of this terrible moment that we can't get out of. Because I remember thinking at some point, I was like, oh, we make time for him every time he's mad, but we don't make time for him just when he wants to talk or whatever. And it's not like we're terrible parents, but it was a good insight.
Again, it's really comes from a place of, I love and care for you. And, you were just saying, everybody has a need to feel loved, seen, valued. Like, when kids are when they're lighting the fuse and creating chaos, they are being seen, they're being loved, and they're being valued. Because again, like, if you don't love them, you're not going to pay attention. It doesn't bother you.
Yeah.
All right. So, and again, it's important to have all three stands. So if you just choose to disconnect, like, usually what happens is they'll escalate to the point where you have to pay attention.
Right. Yeah. Like, this fire is so big, it's not going to put itself out. I better go get the hose or extinguisher. Yeah.
One of the things too that I think is important to address, especially that I would love your take on. So in the family that I grew up in, there was a lot of trauma early on when I was young. And so, but at that time, therapy wasn't as accessible. Things like YouTube didn't exist. There was just a lot less education available everywhere. And one of the things I talked to my mom about was like, man, do as many things now when they're young and growing, and like get them into therapy, do all this, like you work on you, read parenting books, do all the things that you can. Cause it's almost like it pays dividends on the other end of things. When your kid is an adult, they're going to be so much more like healed and whole by the time that they're an adult, that you're not going to have to go back and do all this therapy and all of this stuff then. So I think a lot of times what I'm trying to say is that parents don't realize like you can start all of this stuff now, like learning this approach that you're talking about and reading the books and setting a timer, like play with your kid and talk to them about this and do these techniques as a point of not having to have them crop up when your kid's an adult or a teenager, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Did that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that came to mind is when you're not getting that as a kid, when you're an adult, like life is a lot harder, and trying to learn those skills when you already have a blueprint and a template and wiring that doesn't like jive with that is really difficult. So it's like unlearning and trying to download new things when, have you guys tried to learn a new language? Do you guys speak other languages?
We're currently using Duolingo for Spanish.
Took Spanish.
Yeah, we like kind of do, but no, I don't.
I actually tried to learn a little Arabic, but yeah.
If you try to learn a couple different languages when you're an infant or a child, you pick it up instantly. If you try to do it as an adult, it's like 1,000 times harder. Right? So it's like the same thing. If you don't get what you need as a kid and you get trauma instead, or the absence, like neglect, as an adult, not only are you trying to learn a new language, which is really hard, but you're trying to unlearn the other languages that you thought were the right way to speak. And it's really, really hard to do that as an adult. So because it's twofold, it's unlearning and learning new things. Yeah, that's and a lot of the adult work that I used to do, it was all about what are the things that happened in childhood, what are the defenses and ways that you've chosen to relate or needed to choose to relate that aren't working for you anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a marriage therapist, that comes up, and coach, that comes up all the time, which it usually always goes back to something, right? And we shouldn't be surprised at this because no one had a perfect childhood.
Right.
But yeah, it's the unlearning part is huge. I think if we're open to growth and new wisdom, we have to be also open to unlearning things that don't serve us anymore, right?
Sure.
I want to go. So as I said before, we have a 15, 13, and 10-year-old. And if you could give, I mean, we could probably talk about this all day, but what specifically would the need of a 15-year-old boy be? Like what, in your experience, you've seen tons of 15-year-old kids. Like what do they need?
I got a 16-year-old boy, and I swear to God, his question for me every single day, and he's not overtly asking me this, it's, do I have what it takes?
Oh, yes. Hello, John Eldridge.
Yep. Yeah. Like he'll come by and he'll punch me. Yeah. And it's really a test. Like, can I stand? Like, am I tough? Or we'll go to the gym, and just this morning we were working out. He's like, Dad, I put up more than you did today. Like it's always this competition of like measuring himself against me, the man.
Yeah.
Am I a man? Do I have what it takes? Am I like, and it's not just in physical ways. Like it's in emotional intelligence. It's, am I desired? Like, do girls like me? How do I navigate those waters? So it's really about competency and emotional maturity, and just this overall like question of, do I have what it takes? And do you see me as competent?
Yeah.
It makes me think too, like, ask yourself these questions. What did you need when you were 15? I know that sounds silly, but like,
no,
I'll say that to people.
Idea of
like,
reparenting.
Yeah. In our women's group, I'm like, what did you need to hear when you were a 12-year-old girl? And they know like that. And so sometimes I think that's a really great trick to like, what does my kid need? They're 9. What did I need when I was 9? What would I have wanted if I felt that way at 9, or whatever. Yeah. That's a great question. What's your next question?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be for the 13-year-old, but they're similar enough in age, where I think the 13-year-old asks that very overtly, in a very kind of cool way, which is neat, So, okay, next one. What does a 10-year-old girl need?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. My daughter just turned 13 and she's in 7th grade. I swear to God, a switch flipped this year,
Oh.
where it went from like daddy's girl to I have a social life. You are not included in that. I'd like to be by myself at all times. I'm not really interested in affection. And have you guys read that book, Untangled?
No. Write it
No,
down.
that's the second time I've heard of it today. In fact, didn't you say something? Who's the author?
I I can't remember. I just Larry was talking about. He just interviewed Larry Hagner. Just interviewed the author
Yeah.
of
Oh,
that
that might
book.
be why. Yeah.
That's where I heard it. Yep.
But it's like the 7 developmental
Mhm.
stages of being like a little girl to adolescence, teenager, and then to one. And the first one is separating from your parent,
Mm.
which is exactly what my daughter's doing right now. So for me, I like where my mind has been over the last couple of weeks is this isn't like defiance. This isn't dad's disgusting and I hate dad and like I just need to throw him under the bus. This is like a innate need that I have what it takes, but I can be trusted. I can make good decisions. I'm mature. Like I like I'm really big on competency.
Mhm.
Like that seems to be an but me telling my daughter how beautiful she is, like that's gonna gross her out now.
Mhm.
2 years ago, it was like she would beam and like brush her hair and flutter her eye, her eyelids.
Yeah.
Or eyelashes.
Her eyelids. Whoa, she's
Yeah, her
tripping
eyelids.
up.
I'm like, wait a second. My daughter actually does this thing with her eyes where she can make them like
Yeah,
go
our
back
kid
and
does
forth.
that. Tough
Like
does
it
that.
totally like just freaks me out.
Yeah.
It's like she's having a seizure or something. But
Like that can't be good.
yeah. So for like a 10-year-old girl, I still think it's you're beautiful. You're the apple of my eye. You're worthy and precious, and there's so many ways you can go about doing that, whether it's physical affection or just your words of affirmation and
Mhm.
quality time.
Yeah.
But a 13-year-old girl is a completely different. In my house, it's a completely different animal.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I can see that with our daughter. I mean, she's only 10 and I took her to a daddy-daughter dance before COVID stuff. And I swear it was just like dopamine, oxytocin
Yeah,
drip for her brain. She was
rainbows.
just like,
Yeah.
daddy. It was so awesome, right? And
Yeah.
COVID kind of messed that up, so we
Yeah.
hadn't gone to one. But we were just dancing in the kitchen this morning. I like twirled her around. I was like, okay, Seth, pay attention to this. This is here. You're present. Be present. And it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So which with your daughter, just for our listeners, that is nothing to be alarmed. It is the most appropriate, most developmental, normal thing possible, right? And just knowing that can give a lot of folks some security and not like, oh, what did I do wrong? Oh my
Right.
gosh. It's like, no,
Well,
this
that
is
is
regular.
common too in boys. Like, have you read the
Right.
book Brainstorm by Dr. Dan Siegel? It's really,
No,
really
I haven't. I can't believe I haven't read that because I love Dan
Oh,
Siegel.
he's like my favorite.
Yeah.
I have a crush on him. Don't tell my husband. But Dan Siegel has a book called Brainstorm, and it's all about the developing brain. And he talks about the different phases and like ways that your brain works. And that was one of the most helpful chapters was like early adolescence. And I read this a few years before we had teenagers. And I'm so glad that I did because it's like the pushing away from your parent is like a biological, it's a thing that we go through. It's not, you're not bad. You're not dumb. They don't hate you. You didn't like mess up. It's actually like wired into humans to pull away like that because they need to become adults. And if we look at that process and we start to like shame it or shame them or put like weird meaning to it that just isn't there, it can cause so much trouble and heartache and confusion on both sides or on all sides. So that book is really, really good. I love it.
Well, and I like what you're saying as far as I read that a couple of years before. Because most parents, and like myself included at times, like once things start to go sideways, that's when I start to learn. And it can just save a lot of grief because if you're prepared for it, you understand it. If you're not, you attach meaning to it that usually isn't going to serve you very well.
Right.
Yeah.
Or serve your kid too.
Yeah. Like my daughter pulling away, like it sucks if I'm honest. Like she's not daddy's little girl anymore. It's like she doesn't want to be twirled. Like those days are over temporarily.
Yeah.
And like I have to get really creative at ways to stay connected and fit in a way that she can receive. Because the natural, like just being playful and things that kind of come spontaneous and natural for me, like she's pushing away.
Yeah.
I tried to give her a hug the other day and she's like, oh my God, when did you shower last? I literally just got out of like shower 10 minutes earlier. I was like, I could not have smelled any better.
That's funny. And so if you know that as a parent, then you're not going to take things like that personally, or like you said, you're not going to attach meaning to it. You're going to be like, oh, okay, whatever.
It makes me think too, like our son, Tough, will say things like that, where it's almost like I can look at it now and go, he's literally like testing out sentences that adults say around him. And he's just trying to see if it works. And it's funny because sometimes you're like, no, that one didn't work. That didn't come out nicely. And we try to like be playful about it. But I look at this phase for like, teenage adolescent years, like they're just testing things out. Have you heard that analogy of the roller coaster and the bars on a roller coaster? Have you heard that? It's so good. And I cannot remember where I heard it. Let's just pretend it was Dan Siegel. Dan Siegel once said, just kidding. So there was an analogy where someone was talking about parenting through the teenage years is like riding a roller coaster. And a lot of times parents don't realize, okay, when you get on a roller coaster and it goes upside down, right? That kind of roller coaster, the first thing that happens is the things come down that hold you in. What's the first thing you do when those like straps come down to hold you in?
You shake them.
You push on them. You go, is this stuff going to break when this thing is upside down? And so they're talking about how that is the analogy of like teenagers are not pushing on you because they hate you. They're not pushing on you because of whatever. They want to make sure you're there when stuff turns upside down. And if we can have that in our brain, like, oh, it's almost like a safety. Like I'm testing this, I'm pushing this to make sure you're there. It changes how you see situations. It changes how I see them with my kids anyway. But yeah. Dan Siegel's a genius.
I'm going to definitely be quoting Dan Siegel this week in my coaching sessions. Did you hear about the roller coaster? That's like a really good analogy. And I think that works a lot. That works really well when you're trying to communicate with parents, just because it's hard not to take it personal or to be hurt. Or I'm just thinking like when my daughter was like, oh God, like, God, you stink. Like, when's the last time you took a shower? Like, what I should have done is like smelled my armpit. I'm like, oh crap, you're right. I do stink.
Right.
Because like injecting humor like creates more safety and like, because my impulse is like, God, why are you so rude? Why are you being disrespectful? I'm just trying to give you a hug.
Yeah.
That's kind of where my gut's going. Yeah. Get over here and like hug me back.
Yeah.
So you get into like what is that? You grab their head and you like
a noogie.
Yeah.
Nougat or whatever.
A nougat.
It's not a candy bar. So, okay, this next question, I am seriously asking for a friend. I'm not just making it up.
Yeah, like it's actually our friend.
But and he'll know who I'm talking about. But what would be the best advice for a dad and his young 9-year-old daughter who are constantly just butting heads? Like, of course, they love each other to death. The guy, great guy, wants to be kick-ass dad in all ways, and he is, but they are just boom, 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 butting heads. What would be some best advice for the dad? Because, of course, a 9-year-old has little responsibility. It's all how we act.
Well, and can I add a little caveat? These are both like high intensity people. Like they need all the things all the time. So that's just like, I think an extra thing that's helpful to know.
Yeah. That word intensity is a word we use a lot in the nurtured heart approach. Because your intensity is your greatness. It's like, if you learn how to manage that in a way that's going to work for you and work for the relationships, it's like your gift. So we definitely don't want to punish or shame or medicate that intensity way. We want to be able to reveal ways that you're actually managing that in a healthy way. The first thing I would say to the dad is, why are you butting heads with a 9-year-old? Like in what other relationship would you advise somebody to be doing that? Because if you're butting heads with a 9-year-old, there's obviously some kind of dynamic going on that you're not aware of, because that's completely illogical, irrational. Like, who's going to, if you saw somebody at work arguing with a 9-year-old on the street, you'd probably tell them to knock it off.
Right.
Right. So what do you think he would say if you just said, why are you aware, or why are you arguing with a 9-year-old?
He would say probably what I would say to that when I've had arguments with our once 9-year-old of like, oh, wait a minute, maybe you're trying to parent the way you were parented and you hated it how you felt then, and you're only doing more of what you know, so there's something that you have to work on. And I'm literally just talking to myself now, like,
he would know it was dumb though. He would be like, oh, you're right, I just don't know how not to.
Yeah, because he's operating on a default system. This is an impulsive response. Arguing with a 9-year-old is not like a strategic, effective way of communicating. I don't think anybody on the planet would say that.
Yeah.
And if they did, maybe they don't need to be working with a coach. They need to be working with someone else, like a prison guard or something. But so first of all, like have an understanding that, okay, this is not smart. This is not illogical. Now you're in an open, like, okay, why is that? What can I do different? You're operating out of a default system. And the only way to switch this is if you learn a different set of tools, because if you care and you're operating on a default system, that's better than giving up and quitting. Right? So unless he's like, I'm ready to cash in my chips, I want to give this child up, I don't want to be a parent anymore, which clearly he's not, otherwise he wouldn't be asking questions and hanging out with the two of you. So it's really about learning a different set of tools that are going to help you like achieve what you want, but also operate in a way that you can have integrity with. He doesn't feel good walking away from an argument, I've never felt good raising my voice towards my kids or yelling or behaving in a way that, were ways that I promised I would never behave when I became a parent.
Yeah. I would love to know what some tools are for breaking. So I know like our kid was high intensity too. That was part of the issue, is that it took me so long to realize he was after intensity, but I was feeding that cycle. So what things would you recommend to like break the cycle of intensity if you're a higher intensity parent working on a default system and you got a high intensity kiddo? Like what just things would you recommend?
So the place I would start, and like the specific tools I'd probably give to this guy, is what are 5 of your top character qualities or values, but put them in like character traits. My guess is respect would probably be one of the ones that pops for him. Usually you raise your voice when you sense your child being disrespectful or ungrateful. And instead of teaching your kid all about respect when they're being disrespectful, how about we start getting strategic about being on the lookout for examples of respect? And when you see it, give that same passion and energy when that's happening.
Love it.
Like you have to have somewhere to take all this negative energy and invest it somewhere else. And so you might as well invest it in things that you want more of, that are going to bring you joy and hope. And at the same time, you're learning a different skill on how. Have you guys ever talked to your kids about respect, or been lecturing your kids about respect right after they were disrespectful? And they said, Mom or Dad, thanks so much for that insight. I never saw it that way. I appreciate the, kids are not open to learning when they're being confronted or disciplined. Like that's just not the time. And so if you really want your child to learn about respect and the importance of being respect, you have to just change your timing. Your message is the same. It's just you flip the timing. And so the time to talk about respect is when you have evidence of it. Like right now, the two of you aren't interrupting each other. You're taking turns. That's, self-control. That's thoughtfulness. That's kindness. It's happening like 24/7. We're just not trained to see it. So that's the beginning phase. It's the whole paradigm shift. Is number one, you have to be aware of how you're responding is not a way that you would recommend anybody else respond, and be willing to stop. But you can't stop unless you have a tool to replace instead.
I love that. And it's, I think too, like if you really push into like who you want your child to become, or who you think that they'll become, like the best version of them, and like lift it up every time you see it, not because you're trying to get a reward, but like, oh my gosh, I love that you were so kind to your sister. That is so cool. And she loves it. And it shows that you're a kind person. Like, but it's almost like so subtle. It's hard to remember to do those things. It's hard to remember to catch the good when we're like blind to it 99% of the time, but it's so important.
It's an investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like for the parents that I work with when I'm just in the beginning stages of this, like you're right. You're not going to remember that. And it's not about willpower. You have to somehow trigger your brain to be on the lookout for it. Because again, the brain doesn't notice things that are just like the day-to-day operating stuff. It's something out of the ordinary, like I love you, good luck.
Right.
Or it's the things that drive us crazy that create a stress response. So parents put post-its up, that put ringers on their phone. And one dad, he was a teacher, he put like 10 paper clips in his pocket. And before he took off his work pants, he had to transfer all those paper clips to the other one by giving 10 positive statements to his kids about respect.
Oh, I like
Like
that
they're
a
just
lot.
like, oh, these little ways to hijack so that you do remember it until it becomes a habit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So what is that? Well, it's called forced functioning. And I don't remember the author of that.
Dan
but
Siegel.
Probably Dan Siegel.
Yeah, I think it was going back to him, right? No,
That was well
it
done.
wasn't him.
Really
it
well
was
done.
Maybe Charles Duhigg or somebody like
Charles
that.
Dickens.
No, but forced functioning, right? Like the paper clips and the things. Just don't be silly and don't rely on your brain, just your brain alone to like remember this stuff because guess what? Stuff will get in the way. You'll have to get gas on the way home, or your favorite songs on the radio, or whatever, the dog barfed, or who knows what, and then boom, all that stuff is gone. So forced functioning.
Yeah.
So I want to be respectful of your time, and you said something how intensity is like
a gift.
A gift, you know?
That made me feel really seen, by the way. It's like, oh.
That's awesome. But that ties into one thing that I wrote down that's on your website, the tapping into the inner wealth of children. Can you briefly talk about that statement alone and how parents can recognize that in their kids?
Yeah, and this is part of like nurtured heart philosophy. Inner wealth is the belief system that I have what it takes, regardless of circumstances. Like I have innate value. I have worth, and kids need more inner wealth now than I think ever. And if you think about kids that have challenges, that have a hard time managing their intensity, or they're wired differently, like they need a whole lot more inner wealth because they have a whole lot more challenges. So it's really like an inner belief system that says, I have what it takes. I can overcome this. I'll be fine. I know. And if I don't know what to do, I know where to go. So I'm resourceful. That's why the parenting is so important, is because you want to create a home, like an environment in the home where not having the answer is okay, and asking for help is okay. And us as parents being open and available to notice that. So kids, feel comfortable asking us when they need help. But the inner wealth is really just a belief system that you got it.
I want to comment on that because we work with adults and it's really interesting. I've never kind of pieced these things together and I think especially men, if they don't get that inner wealth of like, you are enough just how you are, like you have value.
You have what it takes.
You have what it takes. And if you don't know, you can go find it. And then what happens is they accidentally look for that the way that their parent was. It's almost like their parent was the giver of value. And then all of a sudden their wife becomes the giver of that value. And it creates this parent-child dynamic that nobody wants, but it's unintentionally happening. So I think that could be like a good insight for parents, like for your kids, like set them up to know, to be secure. I think that's one of the best gifts that my parents gave me. They were like, you're enough just how you are. Like no matter what, you can't walk away so far that we'll never take you back kind of vibes. And it was so, it set me up to be really stable as an adult and not like need Seth to do whatever, but I could allow that relationship to be sort of more organic. I love that. That was a really cool like thing that popped into my head as you said that.
Yeah.
But
that is good. It's funny because we have a lot of notes here. Thank you.
We should do this again.
Yeah, this is
Would
great.
you be down to do this again? Because I have like
for sure
8. I think what we should do would be really cool is like have a topic each time to just like, let's only talk about this thing for like the whole hour. And then let's do like 15 of those. It's you all year.
Well, I really want because
I love talking about this stuff. And you guys are super easy to talk to. I think when you're talking to parents that actually kind of get it and are kind of high performing parents that have a heart to help other people, it just kind of naturally, organically goes in the right direction. So
yeah, for sure.
I'm all
Love
in.
it.
And a lot of our listeners are open to it as well. So I want I want 10 of our listeners. No, I want all of our listeners to go check
12.
out. Right. 12 of our listeners, go check out Dan. No, but what, like you do parent coaching, like for specific things with parent-child relationships.
Yeah.
So where can people find all that you want them to find?
You can go to my website for sure. I got videos and some like information on this, but I would say the best thing they can do is just email me and get on a quick call and talk a little bit more, because I have I created a 90-day intensive like parent coaching process to help parents learn and master these 3 specific stands in a way that they can be genuine and authentically implementing it. I'm not big into programs and say it this way and do it this way, because nobody's wired the same way. And when you do that, you really kind of take away from the personality and temperament of the parent.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Well, the website is thecompass4life.com. And what is your email?
Compass is the word. You say compass. I say compass.
Well, I say it from a Southern accent, so you guys know what I'm saying. But how can people contact you? What is your email address?
It's Dan@thecompass4life.com.
Nice.
All right. So that's super simple. We'll include that in our show notes and on Instagram and stuff like that. But yeah, Dan, thank you so much, man. Thank you for showing up as a parent, as a husband, as a dude who's out there doing good work, and as a fellow therapist, also doing good work, seeing the need and being willing to dive into those communities that are sometimes hard to serve, but you do it. So good job, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. All right. Talk to you soon, man. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got a ton of value as we did from Dan. Make sure and reach out to him, actually. He gives us contact info. We'll also include it in the show notes, but reach out to him. I highly encourage, if you want to learn more about parenting, go do a coaching class that he has. He'll love to work with you. Super cool guy. So,
all right. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Anatomy of Us. This podcast is produced by my mom, Melanie Studley, and hosted by my dad, Seth Studley. Our show is edited and published by our producer, Reva Hansen, from Creative Media Support. Special thanks to our Patreon members that get an extra episode every week. Thanks for watching. Love you. Bye.